there's something very fascinating over here. It's the idea of inheritance. Who gets to inherit, who doesn't get to inherit. We'll take a look. Why is this important right now? Because there's going to be a little piece later on that's going to have a lot of bearing on what's going on. So let's take a look and see from the top. Which means that the first point of giving over the laws of inheritance right now are to do with the allotting of land in the land of Israel. You know, what's going to happen is that every single tribe has been apportioned a certain amount of land inside of the land of Israel, and then within each each portion, each family is going to get a piece of land as well. So for those of you that remember, we spoke about this a little bit when it talked about the laws of the Jubilee year, where everything is going to return back to whichever family originally owned the land, that's where the land is going to go back, because there's some kind of a concept over here, something very important about the idea of the land and the families belonging to each other, which means that in Jewish law, biblical law, when you bought land in the land of Israel, you didn't really buy the land at all. What you would do is that you would rent it for a maximum of 50 years, and then at the end of that period, it would be given back to the people that it originally belonged to, which means that people, the cost of land would decrease the further into the 50 years that you got, because obviously it was going to reflect the fact that you buy it today, you're going to have it 50 years. If you buy it in 10 years' time, you're only going to have it 40 years, and that's going to be reflected within the cost. So over here, all it's saying is that the various tribes are going to be given the land. L'rav tabeh nachlasoi v'lema'at tam'it nachlasoi. If you've got a larger... Now, this is a little bit enigmatic over here. The various commentaries are a little bit unsure as to exactly what this means. Does this mean that the larger tribes are going to get more land? Or does it mean that every tribe gets the same amount of land? And depending on the size of the tribe, depends on whether each family inside of the tribe is going to get more or less? There's no definitive answer over here. What it does say is, L'rav tabeh nachlasoi, that if you've got a larger group, they're going to have a larger inheritance. V'lema'at tamit nachlasoi, and if you've got a smaller group, they're going to have a smaller inheritance. Ish lefi ifkudav yutan nachlasoi. How was it given? How was the land apportioned out? Ach begora yichalek es haaretz lishmo matois avoisam yinachalu, api hagorot techalek nachlasoi ben rav lima'at. There was going to be some kind of a lot, and in it like a raffle that would take place in order to see who was going to get what. Now, why was it done like that? The answer is very simple. That God wanted the Jewish people to see very clearly that whatever land they were giving had been apportioned to them by God. Which means God could have come to Moshe and he could have said to Moshe, this family will get this, and this family will get that, this family will get the other. And then Moshe would have come to the family and said, look, your portion is this one, and your portion is that one, and your portion is the other one. But if that was the case, and at some point, for sure, somebody's going to be upset with the land that they got. Now, that goes without saying. Some of the land of Israel is a lot more fruitful than other parts. Some of the land is more fertile than other parts. Which means that someone's always going to come along and say, it's not fair that he got this, and I got that. So there was a public show of everything being given out to see that it's coming from God. And that way, no one's going to be able to come afterwards and say it's just not fair. What's interesting is that the various bits of land, each bit of land had its own positive dimension, which means some of the land was a little bit rockier, some of the land was a little bit more fertile. But for example, the rockier land was used in order to grow olive trees, which became a very great source of income for one particular tribe. Which means you never quite know when you look at something, right? You never quite know where your source of parnasa, where your source of income is going to come from. There are people in the world who make fortunes of money by selling huge amounts of something and making a tiny bit of profit on each one. My father used to have a friend who used to manufacture wire hangers. And the things that you go to the dry cleaner, and that's what you get. That's what you get given back. Of course, it's a fantastic job to have because wire hangers are never returned, which means that there's always a constant supply being ordered for wire hangers. Of course, wire hangers don't cost very much, and you can't charge very much for them, because if you did, then no one would buy them. So this fellow made a fortune by selling wire hangers for, I don't know what he got for each one, I've got no idea. Maybe 30 cents, maybe 40 cents per hanger, but you sell enough, you make a lot of money from them. Now, for some people, look and they say, what do you mean, I'm going to get 30 cents for a wire hanger? I'm not doing that. There's no way you can make money. And I says, you can, right?
There's volume.
I have a friend who works in the diamond trade. He has a very specific niche. He works in something called colored diamonds. I know, most diamonds are white, transparent and, very beautiful. But there are certain kinds of diamonds which have an inner color to them, which are, if they're clean and if they're real diamonds, they are incredibly expensive. And he's been working in this field for the last, I don't know, 25 years or 30 years even. And he's still waiting to make the big sale. You buy these diamonds, you don't know what kind of state they're going to be in. You've got to polish them, you've got to cut them, you've got to see what's going on inside. And he says, all you've got to do in your professional life, all you've got to do is find one of these things. They sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you get one of these, then that's it. You've done great. He says, in the meantime, he's been doing this for 30 years. He hasn't found that one yet. So you find smaller ones and you sell them for a few $1,000s, and you make it. Of course, he's eating. Don't worry, right? But it's interesting that the fellow who's selling the wire hangers is making a fortune, and the fellow who's selling these potentially expensive colored diamonds, in the meantime, he hasn't made it into the big time yet. A lot of that was going on. People would come into the land of Israel. They would see what was there. They'd be upset. He got land that was beautiful. It was lush. It had its own source of water supply. He's going to be able to grow crops over there. It's not fair. And I got this craggy cliffside over here that I can't do. What am I going to do with this? And it transpires that somehow or other that craggy cliffside that you got is going to be worth a lot more in the end, because it's got some kind of a detail that the others don't have, and from that's where you're going to make your parnasa. That's where your livelihood is going to come from. In order to circumvent anybody complaining that this is Moshe Rabbeinu taking care of his friends, right? Making care, this tribe, I like this tribe, I'm not so keen on that tribe, so this tribe is going to get this beautiful piece of land. That tribe, they can end up with a little bit of land down there bordering onto the desert somewhere. No, everything is being done in a way where it's clear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God is taking care of it. And then, all of a sudden, even though the next part that comes after all of this is going to go back to the concept of inheritance, we take off a little break, and we have over here the counting of the Levites, of Shevet Levi. Anybody here a Levi? A Levi. Oh, here, look at that. We have a representative sitting over here right now together with us. Right? Well, wait till you hear this. This will wipe the smile off of your face. Right? Why is it over here? Why have we got this count over here in between, mamish sandwiched in between the two concepts of inheritance, which means the way the inheritance is going to take place, and then some disgruntled people that are going to come and complain. We've got the count, the census of the Levi, right? Shevet Levi. Why is that? So explain the Mefarshim, because Shevet Levi never got a portion in the land of Israel. Every other tribe was given their section of land, and that belonged to them. Shevet Levi wasn't given any land whatsoever of their own. They were spread out all over the place. There were 46 cities that the Levites lived in throughout the whole of the land of Israel, and they never had anything which belonged to them. Why is that? So here, this is good news, right? The reason is because Shevet Levi were supposed to be the spiritual role models of the Jewish people. And because they're the spiritual role models of the Jewish people, it's very important that they live all over the place. It's not enough to have them concentrated in one particular place and then to say to everybody else, well, if you want to know, what it means to be spiritual, so go to this part of the country and you'll be able to see it. Didn't work like that. God wants the Levites spread all over in order that their influence can be felt all over the place. Interestingly enough, what kind of cities did the Levites live in? They lived in what were known as the cities of refuge. Where were the cities of refuge? What were they used for? They were the cities where somebody killed somebody else inadvertently, manslaughter. They would have to escape and get to the city of refuge in order to be safe. Once they were in the city of refuge, they couldn't be harmed anymore. It's a fascinating idea that these people who committed manslaughter, right, which means that they are people who in some form or another, even sometimes they'll be physically irresponsible, sometimes they were spiritually irresponsible, whatever it is, but they've done something they shouldn't have done. Where do they end up going to live? They end up going to live in a very, very spiritual environment. Right? And that spiritual environment, of course, was inhabited by the Levites. That was their function, in order to have influence on these people, to draw them up and to draw them away from the sins that they were in. What's the idea? It's a very interesting idea, it really is. Let's take off a moment. In Judaism, there's no real concept of prisons. The concept of prison is something which is pretty alien. Right? Why is that? Because in Judaism, there's a concept of punishment. The punishment system, the penal system, has to be meted out according to what was done. If somebody stole something, then he's got to give back what he's stolen, he has to pay a fine. If somebody harmed somebody else, then they have to pay the damages, and they have to pay, if they harmed the person themselves, they have to pay for the medical costs, all the other peripheral expenses that go around it. If somebody kills somebody else, then in biblical terms, if it's murder, then they're put to death. And if it's manslaughter, they're sent off to a city of refuge. That's where they go. The idea of prison doesn't really exist. Why not? Because even though in Western society, prison is something which does serve as a deterrent, there's no doubt about it. There are plenty of people that don't get involved in things that are illegal and antisocial because they don't want to end up in prison. But nevertheless, there's no real spiritual, educational dimension to being in prison. And within Judaism, it's not enough just to have a deterrent. There's got to be some kind of a spiritual dimension that goes together with it. I'll tell you more than that. The truth is that we all know that prisons are a breeding ground for criminality, which means that I think I read a statistic in America which is unbelievable, that 80% of prisoners in America, in the American penal system right now, are repeat offenders. Which was the original idea of sending somebody to prison in order to teach him a lesson and that he should walk out of there and never want to go to prison again. Apparently it doesn't work, right? And most people, they end up just drifting back into a life of crime and very often getting rearrested and going back into prison again, right? Which means that the concept of the penal system in Judaism is it's a healthier system. Now again, I'm not suggesting, I'm really not, that there aren't definite positive dimensions to the penal system in the Western world as well. There are a lot of people who are in prison, which we should all be thankful they're in prison for, not walking around on the streets. That's for sure, right? However, in Judaism, what's trying to be taught is that instead of sending these people off into an environment where there are only other criminals there, which means that there are only other criminals that you can learn from, you know, a first offender goes in as a novice and comes out as an expert, right? What Judaism is trying to say is that what makes sense is to put them into a nurturing, healthy environment, and then hopefully they'll pick up the lessons that are being taught over there, and they'll be able to work with that and become better people, and they won't become, you know, immersed in a life of crime. Does it always work? It doesn't always work, for sure. But the idea is there. And that's why over here, the Torah deliberately places Shevet Levi in between the two concepts of inheritance of the land of Israel to teach that the Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi, have got a higher calling. It's as simple as that. That's what it is. That's what it comes down to.
So the parnasa was only from the Karbanos.
Shevet Levi were given their parnasa from the Jewish people, right? Which means that they were given a certain section of the crops that came in were given to them. They were allowed to have certain parts. It's interesting, even the Kohanim, right? I'm sorry, no, hold on a second. The Leviim had to give to the Kohanim as well. But the way that it worked was that Shevet Levi was supported by the Jewish people. This idea of supporting the spiritual mentors of the Jewish people is something which is very, very fundamental. It really is. And that's why it appears over here. Because it's as much a part of the inheritance as everything else, Shevet Levi. Right? Shevet Levi need to know that they're not getting it in the same way that everyone else is getting an inheritance. They are not getting an inheritance. Right? For a very specific reason. So here, let's go over the page and let's take a look on page 896. We're going to come back now to the concept of inheritance. What's going on? Let's see, the most incredible thing is going to take place over here. Vatikravna benois Tzelofchad ben Chefer ben Gilad ben Mochir ben Menashe lemishpachois Menashe ben Yosef. There was a family which had 5 daughters. The father was no longer alive, and they want to know what's going to happen with their inheritance, because under normal Jewish law, a son inherits and a daughter doesn't inherit. Now, why is that? It's not quite as chauvinistic as it sounds. The assumption is that the daughter is going to get married, and the daughter will receive her husband's inheritance, which means that when her husband inherits, she'll be a beneficiary of that inheritance, and therefore, under Jewish law, under biblical law, a Jewish daughter does not inherit from her father. Just so you should know.
Can you say that again?
Just so you should know.
No, just before that.
Oh, the bit before that, yeah. Under biblical law, a Jewish daughter does not inherit from her father. Okay, let me explain.
Okay.
That does not mean that Jewish daughters cannot inherit, but they have to inherit in a very particular way, which means that under the guidelines, under the strict guidelines that are laid down for Jewish law, girls don't inherit, daughters don't inherit. What about, you want to make sure that your daughter is going to inherit together with your sons? So it can all be taken care of, but it's got to be taken care of in the right way, that's all, which means that a will has to be written in such a way that the daughters can receive, instead of an inheritance, they receive a gift that's gifted to them by the father. It's just got to be written in a very specific kind of a way, and then it's okay. Which means that you should know that the standard will that's written by people, the standard sort of secular will that's written, that's drawn up by a regular lawyer, is a will which is normally not valid according to Jewish law. It's got to be written in a very specific kind of a way.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
If a person has a will drawn up in, say, in the U.S. or any outside of Israel, and then comes to Israel and becomes a citizen of Israel, and ultimately passes away, does that will that accompanied that person to Israel become invalid?
It doesn't become invalid. It does complicate matters. Not for halachic reasons, for legal reasons. Which means that over here in Israel, if somebody passes away over here in Israel and they have assets over here in Israel, then they should really make sure to write a will over here as well. Right? If they have assets over there and they have assets over here, so that maybe they should write 2 wills to make sure that everything is covered, right? But certainly if they have assets over here and the will was written over there, then it can open up potential legal issues. Right? Not talking about halacha over here. We're just talking about basic legalities, which is why it's a good idea to find a lawyer over here and just to find out what needs to be done to make sure. It could be that the way that the will has been written over there is perfectly okay, but it pays to have somebody have a look through it just to make sure. Let's come back to here and let's see. Something very fascinating is going to take place. We've got these 5 daughters. Their father has passed away, and there are no sons. The question now is, who's going to receive, when they start apportioning out the land in the land of Israel, who's going to receive this land? Is it going to go to them? Because the halacha is that if you don't have sons, if you don't have children, then whatever the person has, a deceased person, needs to go to whoever's the closest relative. So it could go to the father of the person, it can go to his brothers. So right now, what's going on over here? They've just found out that the inheritance is going to go through the male side of the family, but there is no male side of the family. There are 5 daughters, and the father is dead.
What does it mean that the father died?
Here, we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it. Oh, we're gonna get there. Stop jumping ahead. These are the names of the girls over here. They are Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milka, Tirza. You should know that these 5 girls were very great tzaddikises. They were very righteous. And they're pretty old by now. They're in their 40s by now. And none of them are married yet. And the reason why they're not married is because they're waiting because they want to get married to people who reflect their level of righteousness. And in the meantime, they haven't met the right one, and they're waiting. It's going to have a lot of bearing in a minute. We'll see. So it says in the Medrash, it says like this. They brought their question to, do you remember the hierarchy? There's one person in charge of 10 people, then there's one person in charge of 50, then there's one person in charge of 100, then there's one person in charge of 1,000, and there's Moshe on the top. So they came to the people in charge of 10 and they asked their question, what about us? What's going to be? And they didn't know the answer. So it got booted up to the next level. And they didn't know the answer in the next level until it comes to Moshe. Look. And they stand at the doorway. They're not going in. They're very modest. And they are loath to draw attention to themselves, but They've got a big, what's called a big kasha over here. They've got a big question over here. Avinu meis b'midbar v'hu lo haya b'soich eidan no yadim al Hashem b'adas korach ki b'chetoi meisu v'anim lo hayu lo. Our father died in the desert, right? And he was not involved in the uprising and the rebellion that took place with Korach. Rather, he died of his own sin. Now, why is this important? Because there's a halacha. When somebody rebels against the king, so when that person is defeated, all of his assets, everything that he has, becomes the property of the king. And under normal circumstances, that's not the case. Which under normal circumstances, if somebody does something and he's given the death penalty, what happens to all of his estate? His estate will go to his children. Let's say, for example, somebody murders somebody else and he's caught and he's tried and he's executed. And what happens to all of the things that he has? All of those things that he have now go to his children. Right? The exception over here is what? Somebody who's a morid b'malchus, somebody who rebels against the king. So it's as if he's lost all rights to whatever belongs to him, and everything then belongs to the king.
Except liabilities?
Except liabilities, for sure. But I'm talking about whatever's left at the end, right? So let's say this fellow's got $1 million estate, right? And he rebelled against the king. So his kids won't get any of that $1 million. The $1 million will go straight to the king. Belongs to him, right? So over here, the first thing that they're emphasizing over here is what? Our father was not involved in the uprising of Korach. Because if he was, what would that mean? They uprose against who? The rebellion was against Moshe. Moshe had a din. Moshe has a status of being like a king. If Moshe is a king, then it means that this fellow over here, if he would have died within the rebellion of Korach, then it would have meant that everything that he had would belong to Moshe. And if that's the case, then they don't have any case whatsoever, right? They can't come now and say, we want land inside of the land of Israel. Why? Because whatever they had belongs to Moshe. So they're emphasizing the fact that what happened, he died. What do they say over here? He didn't die a regular death. He says, they say, ki b'chetoi meis, he died from his own sin. So in the Gemara, there's an interesting dialogue that takes place in the Gemara. What could that possibly mean? This Tzelofchad, what did he do? We don't see people dying in the desert. How did people die? They died because of the sin that took place with Korach. They died because of the sin that took place with the Meraglim, with the spies. But we don't see people dying under regular, normal circumstances, and we don't know of people dying because of sins that were done, except for the sins that are delineated. So Chazal come to the conclusion there are two possibilities. Either Tzelofchad was involved in, I don't know if you remember, but after the Meraglim, what happened? They decided, after the spies, there was a group that decided that they're going into the land of Israel. We're going anyway, right? And Moshe says, don't go, God's not with you. And they say, no, we're going anyway. And what happened to them? They died. So according to one opinion, Tzelofchad was part of the group that tried to get into the land of Israel. Rabbi Akiva says that Tzelofchad was the person who went around collecting up the wood. Remember that story?
Yes.
What was known as the Mekoishesh. He went on Shabbos and he went collecting wood, right? And because he transgressed the Shabbos, he was put to death by the Beis Din. He was given a death penalty. And he did it. Why did he do it? If you remember, he did it what's called L'Shem Shemaim. He did it for the right reasons, because he saw that people weren't being very serious with their Shabbos observance anymore. And he wanted to show everybody what would happen if they didn't treat Shabbos seriously. But that means that it's his own sin. He's not rebelling against Moshe. And therefore, he has every right to be given land in the land of Israel. Says verse number 4. So the girls, these 5 daughters, they say, Lama yigara shem avinu mitoich mishpachtoi. Why should the name of our father, why should it be erased? Why should it be taken away? Ki ein lo ben, because he never had a son. Tana lanu achuzah b'soich achei avinu. Give us our portion. So it says in the oral tradition, it says like this. In the oral Torah, it says like this. They came up with a very interesting, what's called svara. I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of something called yibum v'chalitza. When a woman's husband dies and they have no children, so she has to get married to her late husband's brother in order to bring children into the world. And if they don't want to do that, there's a whole ceremony called Yibum. If they don't want to do that, then there's a ceremony called Chalitza, where he renounces his desire to marry her. And it's a very interesting ceremony. We went through it in the Parsha that dealt with it. It's not for now, but the concept is for now. The B'nai Tzelofchad, the daughters of Tzelofchad, they come and they say like this. We're saying like this. Our father had children. Who are his children? We're his children, right? So give us his portion in the land of Israel. And if our father isn't considered to have had children, that we can't have a portion in the land of Israel, then our mother has to do Yibum in order to retain the status of that land. It needs to stay together with us. You hear what they're saying? I don't know. Makes sense. It doesn't make sense. See, originally the halacha is that if the husband didn't have any children at all, so then he has to do Yibum. And the halacha is that if the person had a daughter, then he doesn't do Yibum anymore. That's it, finished. He's had a child. And yet they're coming along, it sounds like a ridiculous claim, no? Because everybody knows that Yibum, once you've had children, it doesn't matter what sex the children are, it doesn't matter what gender they are. The minute you've had children, then the concept of Yibum is no longer applicable. So what are they asking? So they're saying like this. I think it's a very strong question. They're saying, if you want to say that we're getting no inheritance, then that means what? That's as if we don't have any importance whatsoever. If we don't have any importance whatsoever, then our mother has to do Yibum. And if you're saying that our mother doesn't have to do Yibum because we've been born, then what does that mean? That obviously we're important. So how can you exclude us from within the inheritance?
Two things come to mind in your explaining this. One is they're older. They're in their 40s, I think you said.
Yeah.
And that means the mother's also.
Good.
Okay, so that's one thing. But
yeah. First of all,
but they're not married. So the daughters. What if one of them was of the 4? What if one was
married?
Here, so they're saying like this. If you're saying that the inheritance of the land of Israel only goes through the boys, it makes no difference whether we're married or not. Right? And if that's the case, they're saying like this: Yibum. You should know that Yibum has to be done even if the wife is beyond childbearing years. Let's say you've got a woman, a couple that never have children, and they live a very, very happy, very beautiful life together, and they're married for 40 years. They're married, and then the husband passes away, and she's now 65 years old. she's not going to have any children. And yet the halacha of Yibum is still applicable. The halacha of Yibum doesn't make any differentiation between the age of the widow. It's just a concept which applies to everybody, right? And if one of the kids would have been married, so maybe if they would have had a grandson, I need to think about this, but if they would have had a grandson, then maybe a grandson of Tzelofchad, then maybe it could have flipped over, right, and gone to him. But in the meantime, they're not married. So I'm telling you like this, that the next part of what takes place is even more extraordinary than what's taking place right now. I'll tell you why. Because what they're asking is, in yeshivish parlance, what they're asking is really a klotz kasha. There's no basis to what they're saying. There's no yibum involved. Everybody knows there's no yibum involved over here. Which means that Moshe Rabbeinu should have turned around to them. He should have told them, listen, there's nothing I can do. Inheritance goes according to the boys, and the boys don't get. And girls don't get. And it's got nothing to do with whether your mother had children or not. It's to do with what gender you were. Any cheder kid would be able to tell you that, right? Here, so let's look at Moshe Rabbeinu's verse number 5. Vayakrev Moshe's mishpatan lifnei Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know the answer. It's unbelievable. What do you mean he doesn't know the answer? I'm telling you, ask any cheder kid, any Jewish kid who's going to cheder, who's 6, 7 years old, ask him what the halacha is. He'll tell you. There's nothing complicated about this. And it says, Vayakarev Moshe's mishpatan lifnei Hashem. What does he do? Moshe does whatever he normally does when he doesn't know the answer, right? Moshe never works anything out. We don't see Moshe sitting down anywhere with the very few things that he's not aware of. We don't see him sitting down anywhere and trying to work out, waving his thumb about in the air, trying to work out, well, if you say like this, then it could be like that, and if you say like that, it could be like this. What is Moshe's reaction always when he's not sure about what to do? Just go to God, that's all. Which means that Moshe sees, he hears within what they've just told him, he hears something which, I don't know. Hold on a second, maybe they're right.
But you said that if somebody committed this sin, the father, or wanted to go into Esro, so automatically he lost his possession. No. Only if he's within the rebellion against Moshe. If he's part of the people that wanted to go into the land of Israel, he's not part of the rebellion anymore, which means that his assets remain his. The families, right? So here, we got a little key to understand. How can it be that Moshe didn't know this? If you take a look over here, you'll see the word mishpatan. Right, verse number 5. You see there's a big nun over there? Completely out of ratio to all the other letters.
Final nun, yeah.
Right, a final nun. And it says over there on the side, it says nun rabati. In the Sefer Torah, that's exactly how it's written. You've got mishpat, and then this great big nun sitting next to it. It's coming to be Maramis, it's coming to give us a hint to something over here. Why can Moshe Rabbeinu not rule on the question from the daughters of Tzelofchad? Why not? Because it's to do with the land of Israel. It's the laws to do with the land of Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu can't go into the land of Israel. The land of Israel is not his jurisdiction anymore. You hear the problem, right? Moshe Rabbeinu has been told by God when he struck the rock, instead of talking to the rock, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, you're not going to go in. Right? Which means that a question to do with the land of Israel, it's not his to answer anymore.
Not jurisdiction.
Which means that even though maybe he does know the answer, maybe he doesn't know the answer, but the reason that he's not able to answer is because this is not his domain. It's got nothing to do with it. Where is that hinted to? It's hinted to within the nun, that great big nun. We're taught that there are 50 levels of wisdom, there are 50 levels of a person's connection to God. The letter nun is 50 in Gematria. The nun over here is coming to be merames, to hint to us that Moshe Rabbeinu never reached the 50th level of wisdom, because that 50th level of wisdom is to do with the way things in the land of Israel, and that's not part of his domain. Whilst he's alive, he's not given access into that 50th level. On the day that he dies, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows him, once he's been separated from the Jewish people, he allows him access into that level, but right now, it's not his to have. But there's the most fantastic idea over here. Who takes over from Moshe Rabbeinu? Yoshua. Yoshua, what's his whole name? What's his name? Yoshua bin Nun. Yoshua, the son of Nun. What's the pshat over here? That there's one dimension where Yoshua becomes greater than Moshe Rabbeinu, which is what? To do with the land of Israel. Yoshua takes the Jewish people into the land of Israel, which means that everything that Moshe did ends with Yoshua taking the people in. Vayakrev Moshe's mishpatan, that big nun is there to teach. It's almost as if God is hinting to Moshe and saying, no, this has got nothing to do with you. This is not your business anymore. This is to do with the business within the land of Israel, and it's not yours. So here, let's have a look and see. Let's go on. What's the halacha? Verse number 5 and verse number 6. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe leimor. So God tells to Moshe, Kain benois Tzelofchad doivrois. The daughters of Tzelofchad are saying good. They know the halacha. They know that what they're saying is right. Which means that girls do inherit if there are no boys. But take a look. You need a little bit of simple understanding of Hebrew. Kain benois Tzelofchad doivrois, which means that what they're saying is right. But Cain is nun, like a nun. That the daughters of Tzelofchad, they're like a nun, right? They've reached this level of understanding which is beyond you because it's not your jurisdiction. Hear the dialogue. That they should be given land within their family, within their tribal inheritance. And whatever their father was supposed to get, it should come to them. So it says in the Medrash like this. Where did they come from? They came from Manasseh. So I don't know if anybody here, if you're familiar with what goes on a little bit further along inside of the Parsha, but just before the Jewish people go into the land of Israel, half of Manasseh, the tribes of Gad and Reuven, they want to stay on the eastern side of the Jordan. And half of Manasseh stays together with them. So originally Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, here, if you want a nachal, if you want an inheritance, stay on the eastern side of the Jordan. You can have as much as you want over there because there's no din, there's no halacha of God defining who gets what over there. And what did they say? No, we want to go into the land of Israel. We're not interested in a piece of land which is land of Israel wannabe. We want to be in the land of Israel. It's not good enough. So from their intense desire to have land in the land of Israel, a whole new halacha is introduced over here that if you only have girls, the girls inherit from their fathers. But there's more. It says in the Medrash, it says that the tribe of Manasseh came and they complained to Moshe. They said, what's going to happen now? What happened with land? Rabbi saying, what happened with land? Land stayed within its tribal connection. After 50 years, it went back to where it came from, right? The problem is over here that these girls are going to get married at some point. If they get married to somebody who's not from Manasseh, what's going to happen? The land is going to go out of the tribal areas of Manasseh, and it's going to be given over to whatever tribe their husband comes from. So now that the daughters of Tzelofchad, they're happy because they've got their land. And the tribe of Manasseh is now very concerned because that land now is going to disappear at some point. It won't belong to them anymore. So Moshe Rabbeinu, again, in the Medrash, says like this, Moshe Rabbeinu asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu what they're supposed to do. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them that they should find husbands from within the tribe of Manasseh, which is exactly what they did in the end. Hold on a second. They each, says the Medrash, they each found a husband who was worthy and righteous to be the husband of these very righteous women, and each one got married, and they all came from the tribe of Manasseh. Yeah.
Just the part of the tribe of Manasseh that was east of the Jordan, did they stay there?
Yeah. That's it. They weren't given a piece in the land of Israel. They stayed over there. That was their portion. So here, on the eastern side of Israel, on the eastern side of the Jordan, right, together with Gad and Reuven. Here, one last time.
Isn't it like Moshe, like one idea, one theory is that that's where he may have been.
That's
buried.
where Moshe is buried, over there. It's not maybe. That's where he's buried for sure, over there. And it does say that when the Mashiach comes in, Mitzvah Hashem should come very soon, then that whole area will be incorporated into the land of Israel. Which means that even though Moshe Rabbeinu right now is outside of the official borders of the land of Israel, but Mitzvah Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, it will be an integral part of the land of Israel, and Moshe all of a sudden will be retroactively buried within the land of Israel. He'll be inside the land of Israel. Just one last idea over here about these. There's an awful lot to learn from these 5 daughters over here, which is really, it's quite extraordinary stuff. It really is. A lot of emphasis is placed over here, a lot of details given over here with these 5 daughters. Not only that, but they appear later on. Towards the end, they also appear again. It says in the Medrash like this: Moshe Rabbeinu separated from his wife. Right? When did he separate from her? So according to some opinions, he separated very, very early on. For sure, by the time they left Egypt and went into the desert, Moshe Rabbeinu was separated from his wife. In order to be able to receive Nevuah, in order to be able to receive prophecy from God, he had to be in a constant state of being prepared. What's the problem? The problem with being separated from your wife is that, in a certain way, maybe there's a concern that, at the end of his life, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu will look back and say, you know what? I was pretty righteous, you know that? Look at what I gave up in order to be able to reach the levels that I reached. So right at the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, what the Medrash says, right at the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends in these 5 righteous women who are not married yet, not because Moshe knew that when he separated from his wife, he was going to receive prophecies on a level that no one else was going to get. Which means Moshe Rabbeinu's got a vested interest in separating from his wife in order to be able to reach those incredible levels. These women over here, they had no vested interest. They weren't getting something from it. But rather what? They remained voluntarily unmarried in order to be able to marry people that were on the same level that they were on. It's almost as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu sending a subliminal message to Moshe Rabbeinu. What's he telling them? He's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, listen, you may think that you're a great guy for having done what you've done. But you know what? There are some girls over here who in a certain dimension are even greater than you are. Because at least by doing what you did, you got something out of it. In the meantime, they didn't get anything out of it. They're just waiting. They're waiting in order. They don't want to get married to people who are on a lesser level than them, and they're prepared to wait until they find people that are worthy of them. Right towards the end of his life, Moshe Rabbeinu is being given a little, it's called a Musa shmooze. He's being given a little bit of Musa from God, like nothing heavy. Just to let him know that what you did all the right things, and you were the most wonderful person, and there's nobody like you, and there will be nobody like you, but you should know that you got something from this as well. Because to be able to have that connection with God is something, if we could only understand what it means to be connected to God like Moshe Rabbeinu was, we would all of us live our lives like Moshe Rabbeinu. There's not one person who wouldn't want to do it, I'm telling you. But we don't understand. We're too physical to understand what that really means. So we're not Moshe Rabbeinus. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, you did good, you really did, but you should know that you got something out of it. And in the meantime, these righteous ladies, they're waiting, they haven't got anything yet. They're just waiting because they know that that's the right thing to do. It's the most astonishing thing, it really is. All this is coming from what? From just one little question about what to do. What we called at the beginning was called a klotz kasha, right? A question that didn't really have any depth to it, didn't have any meaning to it, and all of a sudden we're learning the most incredible things from it. Good. In Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to stop over here. Tomorrow, we're going to learn a little bit more about the laws of inheritance and, we'll go weiter, Mitzvah Hashem.